What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It is Monday, February 18th, 2019, start of a brand new week. And it's also President's Day, which is the day where the president comes out of the Oval Office. And if he sees his shadow, you get no tax refund. And as a matter of fact, Claire and I were at the store the other day, and we saw this young couple talking to a salesman, and they said they were planning on using their tax refund this year to buy some new kitchen appliances, and the salesman said, well, the toasters are right over here. So we've got a lot to talk about today. In fact, the talking points list is very full. So I'm going to ask that you only call in if you have something relevant to contribute, not just to hear your own voice on the radio. The phone number is 800-313-9443. Mike is in the control room. Let's get right on into it. Now, last night, you had Andrew McCabe was on CBS 60 Minutes and basically said Justice Department officials discussed a plan to use the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office and reverse the results of the 2016 election. And they didn't really have grounds to do so. And I'm hoping that a lot of people were watching 60 Minutes and that they're going to be outraged because this was effectively a coup d'etat. Whether it's within the law or without forcibly removing somebody from office, that's a coup d'etat. And Senator Lindsey Graham is saying that he's going to investigate this, and good for him. It has to be looked at. Graham is saying we're going to find out what happened here, and the only way I know to find out is to call the people in under oath and find out through questioning who's telling the truth, because the underlying accusation is beyond stunning. And of course, the senators out there saying that an investigation into the FBI is not going to further damage the Bureau's credibility. My postscript to that is they have none left anyway. But here is something for all of you to realize. This plot, and that's exactly what it was, where McCabe and these other justice officials plotted to use the 25th Amendment to bring down President Trump. That's the deep state. That's the deep state in action. So if you ever had any lingering doubt about that deep state, that was it. And the fact that the Democrats were even thinking about this indicates it's all about gotcha politics, and it's all about who's got the power and who's going to get the access to the money. And they were out there to remove a duly elected president of the United States. Now, the 25th Amendment was originally created to deal with a president who was too ill to carry out his duties and temporarily replace him with a vice president. And of course, I'm sure that this particular coup revolved around a claim that Donald Trump was mentally ill, which, of course, is something very difficult to prove. There's no machine you can put on somebody's head where there's a red light and a green light that says sane and insane. It just doesn't exist. All of psychiatry is subjective opinion by its practitioners. So that would be a weak one. Now, here is the real shocker. Apparently, 2 of Trump's own cabinet officials were ready to support this scheme to invoke the 25th Amendment. This is coming out of Bloomberg and Fox News. And this came from close to testimony from the FBI's former top lawyer, James Baker, who said that the claim came from the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. So that is just a stunner. 2 of Trump's own cabinet members, and they have not been identified. But he says that McCabe and former FBI lawyer Lisa Page approached him to relay their conversations with Rosenstein, including their discussions of the 25th Amendment scheme. Now, obviously, it did not move forward, and there may be a couple of different reasons. One reason may be that they didn't get enough people on board. Now, one report said that Vice President Pence was approached. Pence is denying it. They may simply have not gotten enough people on board to do it, or they may have realized, especially after all the violence that was in the streets following the 2016 election, that taking Trump out through the 25th Amendment might trigger a revolt in this country. It makes the deep state too visible, and it already has here. Now, former CIA officer and whistleblower Kevin Shipp says the reason for all the crime and treason at the FBI and the Department of Justice all boils down to one thing: the Clintons' so-called charity. And Shipp is saying Hillary Clinton was running and still runs a global financial criminal syndicate. And apparently all of these top officials at FBI and Department of Justice, they're all dirty with it. And Shipp is saying that the real reason she had this private server in her home wasn't just the email. She was using these servers to conduct Clinton financial money laundering around the world. And so, yeah, we have a criminal government is basically what it comes on down to. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And I want to spend a little time talking about this Jussie Smollett attack. Now, Jussie Smollett is a cast member of the TV show Empire. And he came out a while back claiming that he had been attacked by Trump supporters. And he was rather attacked. Anyway, the upshot of it is he was trying to save his career. He'd been informed that he was going to be written out of the show, and he thought that getting a lot of publicity all of a sudden might cause the executive producer to change their mind. And in fact, the executive producer came on out and said, yeah, the story brought tears to his eyes. And he also hired additional security for the rest of the cast when he heard this story come on out. So it turns out these two Nigerian brothers who've been arrested over this attack, they're friends with the Empire star. One of them actually worked on the show, and apparently Smollett hired them to stage the attack. They even rehearsed it ahead of time. He paid them $3,500. And of course, he got a lot. He did get his publicity. He was on Good Morning America out there saying, you know, it's all the fault of the Trump supporters, and was telling another audience that I'm the gay Tupac. But it turns out it was all a hoax. It was another hate crime hoax, as so many of these hate crime hoaxes have been. And the case is now going to go to the grand jury. And this guy could go away to jail for a long time. So forget about coming back to Empire. And there have been so many of these hoaxes. Right after Trump's election, the Southern Poverty Law Center was out there about this pro-gay Episcopal church in Indiana was vandalized with Heil Trump and a swastika and an anti-gay slur. Oh, it's the Trumpers. It's the Trump supporters. It turned out it was the gay organ player of that church who did it. Right after the Pittsburgh massacre, Trump supporters were blamed for Nazi vandalism at a Brooklyn synagogue and fires in a Jewish community. And it turns out that perpetrator was a gay black man who'd worked with the city council on an initiative to fight hate crimes. 1 week before the presidential election, a black church in Mississippi was burned in an arson attack. Vote Trump was written on the wall. After much panic, an investigation revealed the man responsible was a church member, Andrew McClinton. In November of 2016, a Muslim student at the University of Louisiana said that two white racist Trump supporters brutally assaulted her, ripped off her hijab, and robbed her. The story went viral. That turned out to be a lie. And apparently over at Nassau Community College in Long Island in late 2016, KKK and Nazi graffiti were sprayed on the buildings there, and Trump and his supporters were blamed for that. It turned out it was a student, Jaskira Saini. And it just goes on and on and on. Hoax after hoax after hoax, and this is another one. So over at CNN, one of their guests took issue with them because the media just went with the story. They took it right at face value, and oh my goodness, he was attacked by homophobic, racist, Trump supporters. And it was a hoax. And the whole media, they're not really apologizing. They're out there trying to say, The fact that there was no hate crime, oh, that's a negative. What a shame that it turned out not to be true, which is an interesting approach. And it wasn't just the corporate media. Kamala Harris was out there tweeting, Jussie Smollett is one of the kindest, most gentle human beings I know. I'm praying for his quick recovery. This was an attempted modern-day lynching. No one should have to fear for his life because of their sexuality or color of their skin. We must confront the hate. Same thing from Cory Booker, and I think they're reading out of the same script because he too used the word lynching. To those in Congress who don't feel the urgency to pass our anti-lynching bill designating lynching as a federal hate crime, I urge you to pay attention. Well, lynching is already a murder. Okay? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez castigated the corporate media for describing the incident as a possible hate crime. She was determined it happened, and it happens all the time. Joe Biden chimed on in saying what happened to Jussie Smollett must never be tolerated in this country. We must stand up and demand that we no longer give this hate safe harbor, that homophobia and racism have no place on our streets or in our hearts. We're with you, Jussie. Bernie Sanders. Racist and homophobic attack on Jussie Smollett is a horrific instance of the surging hostility towards minorities around the country. We must come together to eradicate all forms of bigotry and violence. They all got sucked in. It played to their agenda. It was what they wanted to see. Nancy Pelosi had put out a tweet saying the attack on Jussie Smollett was an affront to humanity. She's already deleted that. All right, let's take a phone call from Bill in Wisconsin. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, there's a lot of things on my mind. That Smollett thing, the minute that it was reported on national news, I knew it was phony. Okay? You know, just the gut feeling. The other thing, when Trump signed, the bill and for the funding of everything on Friday, but said we're going to an emergency. He had previously stated, you can go back and check this, when they had another one of those intervening funding bills. This is the last time that I'm going to do that, he says. I'm never going to do that again. So he did it again.
He did what again?
Pardon?
He did what again?
He signed another interim funding bill.
Well, he didn't really have a choice. He didn't really have a choice because if you look at the Senate vote, it was overwhelmingly in favor of the bill. If Trump had vetoed it, they would have overridden his veto, and that would have been seen as a political defeat. So he was really backed into a corner.
We don't know until all of that transpires.
No, looking at that Senate vote.
Prior to yours.
No, listen to me. Listen to me. Listen to me. Bill, listen to me.
Funding for
Bill, listen to me. Okay?
Okay.
All right. If you look at that Senate vote, okay, it was obvious that they had a veto-proof majority. Had Trump vetoed the bill, the Senate would have overridden it. It would have been a political defeat for Trump. Okay? That's just the way the system works.
Well, instead, we have a defeat for the unborn children. We have a continuation of the funding for Planned Parenthood.
Yeah,
okay?
I'm not happy about that.
And who knows what else is in that 800-page sucker that he signed. Again, Nancy Pelosi, let's sign the bill and then let's see what's in it.
Yeah, that's getting to be a bad habit.
Exactly what's in it.
All right. Well, listen, Bill, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go and get on back here to the news because we have a lot to do of it here. Anthony Weiner is a free man, sort of. He's still under supervision, but he got an early release. And apparently he has to spend a few more months under federal supervision before he's completely in the clear. But he's basically out there, and where he was was actually more of a hospital than a prison. He was actually in a clinic for treatment of his sex addiction here. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Frank in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Mike, I heard that Al Sharpton, you have to confirm this for yourselves out there, but I heard that he's come out and basically said, look, this is a staged event. This guy needs to pay for it criminally. And you know what? That's smart on Al, on his part, because that's really the only way to diffuse a situation like this,
yes.
tactically speaking, if you're on the other side. So that's the quickest way for them to make it go, is just make this guy pay, make an example of him, say we're not going to tolerate it. But fortunately, for our side, tactically speaking, most of them are not going to do that. They're just going to keep pushing it like it really happened. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. And it's amazing to see the corporate media is still out there trying to find some way that they can rescue the narrative from this. But I just confirmed, Al Sharpton says Smollett should face accountability to the maximum, and that would be 3 years in prison. And I understand the guy, and here's the irony. He didn't do it for political reasons. He didn't do it to go after Trump. He didn't do it to incite race hatred. He was just trying to not get written off the show. He wanted to keep his acting gig. That was it. That was his entire motivation. And we have had so many of these hate crime hoaxes. Somebody does need to be made an example of. And I'm sorry if it turns out to be Jesse. But again, look at how many of these blame Trump and the Trumpettes stories we've had going back to the election of 2016, and every single one of them has turned out to be a complete fake and a hoax. And the corporate media, when the story first comes out, oh my goodness, Trump supporters do this. And then it turns out to be a hoax, and they'll bury the fact that it was a hoax and a fake, back on the back page. They'll backpedal it. They don't want to have to admit that they got taken in, or they were part of the propaganda here. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Tulsi Gabbard, because she's out there making a lot of waves. She's attracting a lot of attention. Apparently, she had a couple of rallies over this last weekend, including up in New Hampshire, my old home state, that had standing room only. So she's drawing a huge crowd. And you would think that she would be a dream candidate for the Democratic Party. She is a woman. She is not white. She has impeccable patriotic credentials. She served in the military in a combat zone. That's a very strong, set of credentials right there. She does not have any skeletons in her past, certainly not like the Clintons do. The only reason they don't like her is she's anti-war. So we're going to be watching Tulsi Gabbard, not because of the issue about whether she has a chance of winning or not. And while I don't agree with her about issues like the Second Amendment, I'd like to see her get ahead. But we can watch her as, shall we say, a thermometer of the Democratic Party as a whole. Because in watching how they react to her, we're going to start learning more and more about the other candidates running in 2020. By the way, did you know that Donald Trump is the first president not to have a pet dog in the White House in well over a century? And somebody asked him about it at his rally in El Paso, and he said he wouldn't mind having a dog, but he just doesn't have the time. How would I look walking a dog on the White House lawn? It would look phony to me, which may have been a dig at Barack Obama. All right, we're coming up here on a commercial break, and we'll be back with a lot more news and information for you after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And once again, we have our hands out to you because Republic Broadcasting, we don't get money from George Soros. In fact, I'm pretty sure we don't even get a Christmas card from him. And so we need your help. We need your help to keep doing what we're doing, which is to get information out to you so that you can make good choices. in the best spirit of Thomas Jefferson. The postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can call in a credit or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. All right, now, okay, I am surprised at how the Democrats are still focused on the MAGA hats. And apparently over at the Washington Post, they have a columnist, Matt Sears, who's also a professor. And he's out there saying that in the future, finding the parents' MAGA hats will be the equivalent of discovering their Ku Klux Klan hood. Which I think that was really the shark. How do you equate making America great again with what the Klan was doing here? And this hatred being directed at the MAGA hats is getting out of control, because over in Tennessee at a Sam's Club, there was actually one customer wearing a MAGA hat and another customer pulled a gun on him, 40 caliber Glock, according to the story, and put it in his face and said, "Today's a good day to die." Fortunately did not pull the trigger, but he's in jail now, understandably. All over a hat. Over at a Vans shoe store, there was an employee literally told a 14-year-old kid, "Blank you," rhymes with luck, because the kid was wearing a MAGA hat. And he got fired. But there is so much violence out there over a cap. It's just a baseball cap, people. All righty. Let's take some phone calls here. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I'd like to talk a little bit about first off, Jesse Smollett. It's a hate crime. To falsely accuse somebody of a hate crime is a hate crime. The guy deserves to be in jail. But that MAGA hat thing, Mike, I think is what people have been conditioned by the media to look at as white supremacist. And so it's kind of open season on anybody. And if you want violence done against you, wear one of those hats, put a Trump sticker on your car, and see what happens. But what I really wanted to talk about, Mike, was that whole McCabe thing on 60 Minutes.
Yes.
And how how completely dangerous it is, and then of course the ship thing, talking about the deep state and the Clinton Foundation. It is all the same. All the deep state, the Clinton Foundation, the corrupt government, it goes on both sides of the aisle, but mainly Democratic and metastasized under the Democrats, I believe, to a really large extent. But when you think about it, Mike, they had, not only was McCabe and the FBI and the DOJ with Rosenstein, but what's his name, the head of Director of National Intelligence, the liar, what's his name?
They keep changing jobs so often, I keep forgetting who's currently there.
Clapper,
Clapper,
yeah. The liar that went in front of Congress a couple times. He was involved in it. Then of course, Brennan, CIA, was involved in it. Then you can even say that with the dodgy dossier thing that happened over in England, and that MI6 was even involved in this. And it's huge. It really is huge. It is a coup. There's no doubt about it. And then throw in there George Soros and his riot.
Yeah.
Funded money cost. And it's enormous. It was, and the compliant media that went along with the entire message, which again is reflected in the whole Jesse Smollett thing. immediately jumping to anything at all.
Yes.
And labeling it like basically what it's really labeling is like white supremacist. Really, that's what they're trying to translate this all into. Trump, white supremacist, anything to do with supporting him, and they're okay to attack. That's the way I see it. But this is throughout several different intelligence community agencies, cabinet ministries, like certainly the Justice Department, and
well, it's the same group of people. I mean, you know, you'll have somebody who's FBI director, and then they wind up being attorney general, then they go on over. It's the same clique of people, just changing jobs constantly. Anyway, Peter, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Got another caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones here to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, it's interesting that somebody pulled a gun on somebody wearing a MAGA hat here in Tennessee, because I wear mine all the time, and I always get good reactions, except usually it's older women, white women, that give you the, like, horrified stare. But I get, especially, you know, we don't have too many black folk around here, but they're actually friendly about it. I get a lot of guys going, hey, I like your hat, or nodding or smiling. So the whole racial thing behind it is just the cloak, once again, by the left, to try to cloak political opinion that they don't like as racism, and then to try to, you know, to stir it up so people won't wear the hats because they're embarrassed, they don't want to be called racist. But I think a lot of black people see through it, that it's just a ploy of the leftist socialist communists. And that's the way I feel about it from experience wearing it. Now, if I wore it in downtown Baltimore, I don't know what would happen, but, you know, it might be a little different than being out here in Tennessee. But I don't know. You know, you'd be surprised. You know, I think if you wear it on a college campus, you're looking for trouble. Anywhere there's a bunch of crazed lefties, you're better off not wearing it.
Yeah.
Portland, Oregon, or Berkeley. But I would bet that you could probably wear it in a lot of, like, inner city areas, and people wouldn't, you know, I would bet you'd probably be safer than you would in Berkeley. The other thing I wanted to talk about real quick is this whole thing with Amazon in New York. And I'm wondering if Ocasio-Cortez is going to get her Beale moment, like in Network, where they call her on the carpet. I mean, the people, I mean, the amount of money and the future possibility of industry and tech in Long Island City that she lost. I'm surprised the mafia, the cement boys and the builders aren't going to, you know, get a hold of her. I mean, she really totally destroyed that area, Long Island. I mean, that was going to be billions and billions of dollars in tax revenue. And I feel sorry for the people in upstate New York and out in Long Island, eastern Long Island, because it would have really helped them with their taxes. And it's just the biggest fiasco. And you know, I remember that Neil Young song, Cortez the Killer, and somebody ought to do that song with Cortez the Job Killer, because that was 25,000 jobs at $150,000 average.
Yeah, and for her
Imagine all the politicians that tipped off their real estate buddies that put a big investment. We're going to get rich. And all of a sudden, this crazed sorority girl from Boston University, you know, with their socialist ideals, comes in there and destroys a good thing for a whole lot of people.
Okay, well, let's be fair here, okay? It was Amazon's decision to pull out of the deal. But Alexandria definitely was not thinking when she, you know, was on camera saying this is a good thing. That was probably the biggest single political mistake she's made, and it could easily cost her any possibility of success in the primaries.
Oh no, she's finished. She's completely finished. They're gonna. And the other thing I found interesting was Cuomo meeting with Trump that week before the announcement was made, and they said it was about that salt taxes, but I bet you he knew, and he was calling visiting the president, because the president's from Queens, to see if he could do anything to rescue that deal. But I hope Trump told him, hey, you like killing babies, you know, so screw you. I mean, I grew up in New York. It's a great state. But, you know, Cuomo used to go around and say, if you're against abortion, I don't want you in my state. Or if you like having guns. I don't want you here. Well, people have taken him on that word, and they're all leaving his state now, and he doesn't know what to do. And really, I don't dislike New York, but any people, if you can tolerate a governor like that does that to your friends and family and chases people out because of their political ideas. And I just love to watch it fall apart. And that's what's going to happen. This Amazon thing, it could have been, the future potential. I mean, how many businesses and startups? It could have been the Silicon Valley of the East Coast, and they blew it.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. You can't say enough what a disaster this is for New York. And it's coming like a week or two after the infanticide bill and the lighting of all the buildings. I couldn't happen to better people.
Well, again, to be fair, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had nothing to do with the deal falling apart. That was entirely on Amazon, and now we're hearing that they have canceled plans to build a second headquarters because they think business is about to tighten up as we head into a recession. Anyway, Joe, thanks a lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the lines because I've got so much news I really need to get to. Jim in Washington State, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, always a great show, Michael. Here's your problem, Michael, and it's big. This is going to cost Trump his presidency. Already now, I can say absolutely for sure his base is cracked, and so probably only one thing he can do to repair it. But here's the problem: you're thinking about him signing that bill, especially for that $500 million for Planned Parenthood. You say it's veto-proof. Trump could have easily said, number one, he could have said, "Look, I'm not signing that bill if the Planned Parenthood money's in it," before they even pushed it through. But secondly, which would have forced a lot of the pro-life senators to choose which side they're going to go. But even now that he signed it, he's the executive. He can do what Obama's done, which Obama did to a lot of different conservative organizations. He withheld the money as the chief executive. He did not release the money to these different political operations, which were conservative. And they just folded back into the Treasury, the budget for the next year. But if he releases that $500 million, Michael, I can tell you, you're not a Christian, so you don't understand this. But if he releases that money, he's cracked his pro-life base. It's over for him. I can tell you that now.
Okay, well, I agree with you. If you're hearing a strange sound in the background, it's because my neighbor is building and he's using an electric saw, and that's the source of that weird whistle-like noise that you're hearing
like
from
a train.
time to time. No, it's not a train. Anyway, I also take exception to the comment about my not understanding because I'm not a Christian. I'm actually pro-life. And I've come to that decision out of personal experience and long thought about it. But
see, as a Christian, this is the difference, Michael. Yeah, I know you're pro-life, you're secular, agnostic, atheist, whatever. That's fine. But see, as a Christian, once you actually pull that lever for somebody who's engaged, especially in the cannibalization of children, the harvesting and cannibalizing of the unborn, that means that guilt spiritually goes on to you as a Christian believes it. So we cannot actually vote for Donald Trump, or we'll be guilty of the innocent blood of children. That's how big it is.
I agree. It's a big thing. And I'm also in agreement. I think Trump is a one-term president. He's alienated his base, not just the pro-life movement. He's turned his back on the independent media, which we all worked collectively very hard to get him into that Oval Office. He has failed in his promise to get us out of these foreign entanglements. He dropped the ball on vaccine safety. He dropped the ball on honest elections. He's put his total focus on the border wall, and it still may not get built there with all this other stuff that's going on.
With that being said, Michael, he can win it because he's a Zionist. It could be that the Israeli lobby is going to actually rip the election off this next time in favor of Trump. That's a very real possibility because he's a 1,000% full-blown Zionist.
There are a lot of 100% Zionists lining up for 2020, and I think Israel is probably looking for a new champion because Trump is rapidly becoming a damaged brand.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you, Michael. He's made this, but this last mistake with this Planned Parenthood, another $500 million. That's a bridge too far. He's cracked that whole pro-life base. I mean, it's just nothing we can do. It's like a bullet right in the head. There's nothing we can do. We can't vote
I
for
get
him
the
now.
feeling that Trump didn't really read that budget past the part about whether he was going to get the wall money or not. I mean, that budget was 800 pages, and we are already hearing from insiders that Trump doesn't like to actually read legislation or reports. He'll let his staff summarize them, which means the staff can spin it to suit their own personal agendas, and everybody's got an agenda. Now we're finding out 2 of his own cabinet members were on board with that 25th Amendment stunt.
Yeah, and not only that, his advisors, Michael, the people around him, which advisor told him, look, it's okay to go ahead and give Planned Parenthood another $500 million? Who did that? That killed his presidency. As soon as he signed it, he signed his own presidential death warrant.
Yeah.
And I don't even think the guy even realized what he did. Always a
I don't
great
think
show,
he did.
Michael. You got a lot of it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think he did. Anyway, listen, I got to let you go. I've got a lot of news, and I really need to get through it. So thank you very much. And we're going to close the phone lines now for a while. If I get through the majority of this news by hour 3, we'll reopen the phone lines there as well. But for right now, I just want to focus on getting the news out here. Okay, over in Syria, the military situation is escalating in central and western Syria. So much for the drawdown, and it's calming on down here. But the Syrian Arab Army, backed up by the pro-government militias, launched a scale combing operation in the deserts of Damascus, Deir ez-Zor, Raqqa, and Homs. And another growing point of instability in the so-called Idlib de-escalation zone, is the so-called Idlib de-escalation zone. During the past 3 days, the Syrian Arab Army and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham-led forces are constantly exchanging artillery strikes and even sporadic force-on-force clashes here. So Russia is sending mixed signals about the agreements regarding the situation in the Idlib zone by Turkey, Russia, and Iran. And Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said there's a need to make steps aimed at clearing Idlib from terrorist groups, but noted that this does not mean a military operation. So that's going to be a little bit tricky. Here's where it gets interesting. Colonel François-Régis Laguerre, who's been in charge of directing French artillery supporting the Syrian Democratic Forces, who are neither Syrian nor democratic, he's now facing punishment after making critical remarks regarding the U.S.-led coalition operation against ISIS. And the reason he's in trouble is that Colonel Laguerre openly admitted the coalition is not hurrying up to defeat ISIS, and that this had resulted in an increased death toll among civilians as well as increasing levels of destruction. The U.S. does not want ISIS to be wiped out completely because look at all the counter-arguments to Trump's stated withdrawal. ISIS is still a threat. ISIS is still out there. Memo to the forces over there in Syria, back off on ISIS, let them get on back together because we need them to resell a new Syrian war. And we may be looking at a major escalation. Over in the Washington Times, they had this headline story, and this is pure Bex. Assad has used chemical weapons 300 times since the Obama Red Line. And they're citing a report from the Global Public Policy Institute, which is a European think tank based in Berlin. And basically, they had 500 claims of chemical weapons and said, well, we can credibly confirm 336. This is pure propaganda. As we've explained before, Assad does not need to use chemical weapons. First of all, Assad surrendered all of his chemical weapons with that deal that Russia brokered. And all of Syria's chemical weapons were destroyed, and international inspectors watched them all go. And it's the U.S. that's been saying, oh, he kept some, he kept some, he kept some, he kept some. This is just more fakery. Assad does not need to use chemical weapons. He's winning the war. And he's smart enough to know that the use of chemical weapons would give the United States justification to come back on in. Now, what's really kind of interesting to watch is that even the corporate media is now acknowledging that the hospital scenes from the alleged chemical attack last April in Douma, Syria, was staged by activist groups like the White Helmets. And of course, this vindicates all of us who basically said this isn't making any sense. It's not making any sense. Assad has no reason to do this. And we were all being called conspiracy theorists and, other dismissive names here. But now, even they're having to admit that, yeah, we were right and they were wrong. And it's kind of entertaining watching how they're trying to salvage the evil Assad message. Because people are looking at what happened in Douma and they're wondering, is it all been fake? And yeah, it's all fake. Everything that angers you to support a war is a lie. Look at all these countries the United States is in right now. 38% of the countries on Earth the U.S. is militarily involved in. You tell me which one of them actually attacked us. So, now Assad is sending a message out to all of the U.S. proxies inside Syria, like the Kurdish-dominated Syrian Democratic Forces, saying, you need to understand, nobody's going to protect you. When the United States leaves, that's going to be it. The Americans will put you in their pockets so you can be tools in the barter, but that's about it. Now, Russia is coming on in saying it's time for the Syrian Kurds to begin a dialogue with Damascus and basically say, let's work this out peacefully. Otherwise, there's going to be a permanent military presence along that portion of the border. And Russia, again, Putin is the global statesman, trying to tamp it on down and settle this situation with dialogue, with peace. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is demanding, we're demanding again, that Europe take back and lock up 800 ISIS fighters captured in Syria, or he says the U.S. will just release them and they'll just permeate Europe. And Denmark has already said no. Germany says there are legal issues, which is German speak for no. So once again, we see that Europe is basically breaking free of U.S. control. We're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, the European Union is getting ready to blacklist 8 more Russians over this standoff with Ukraine in the Azov Sea. This is coming from diplomatic sources. And the foreign ministers discussed today further EU support for Ukraine, especially the southeastern regions most affected by the conflict. And once again, they repeat the lie. Russia annexed the Black Sea Peninsula of Crimea from Kiev in 2014 and backed separatist rebels in Donetsk and Luhansk industrial regions. This is coming from Reuters. So one more time, kiddies, Russia did not annex Crimea. Following the U.S.-backed coup d'etat in Kiev that drove Yanukovych from power and installed Poroshenko, the Crimeans held a referendum about seceding from Ukraine, since it was obviously no longer their government in Kiev. The referendum passed overwhelmingly. Then the Crimeans held a second referendum about merging with the Russian republics. That, too, passed overwhelmingly. All of this is perfectly compliant with the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But corporate media is here to sell you lies and illusions. Oh, Russia took Crimea, those evil Russians. Who is it who's doing all the invading all over the globe? Who went into Iraq? Who went into Afghanistan? Who went into Syria? Who went into Libya? Who is currently operating in 39% of the countries of the entire planet. It's not Russia. Now, one mistake I think Russia has made is they apparently still have not released those 24 Ukrainian sailors who basically sailed through the Kerch Strait into the Sea of Azov without following the Russian protocol. It was a deliberate and obvious provocation. But I think Russia would be well advised to return them and at least defuse that part of the situation. Down in Venezuela, and by the way, Trump is up there talking about Venezuela right now and has been for quite a few minutes at his latest rally here. So the U.S. is ratcheting up pressure on Maduro, sanctions on some of his top security officials and the head of the state oil company, as well as the plans to airlift over 200 tons of aid to the Colombian border, which I understand has already arrived in defiance of Maduro. Now, these planes are technically in Colombia, and supposedly this aid, which I think is probably, as Maduro thinks, guns, ammunition, bandages, and so forth, will be smuggled across the border. And meanwhile, Venezuela has received 933 tons of aid from its known allies. Most of this is medical aid, prenatal vitamins, and 25 million euros worth of humanitarian aid delivered to Puerto de la Guara, Venezuela. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Here we're talking about Venezuela, and Maduro is still out there talking tough, saying that Venezuela's armed forces are ready to slaughter American invaders. This is shaping up to be another Vietnam. Meanwhile, the United States insists it is going to be able to convince the Venezuelan military to abandon Maduro and slide on over to support Guaido. All of this, of course, is propaganda. Truth is always the first casualty of war. But again, we know that the United States has been lusting after Venezuela for a very, very long time, and things are getting very tense down there. Global commodities firm Trafigura has decided to stop trading oil with Venezuela due to the U.S. sanctions on the OPEC nation's energy sector. Russia's Gazprom Bank is freezing the accounts of Venezuela's PDVSA. I'm surprised that Russia did that, but it could be that Russia is getting ready to trade for Venezuela's oil in some other currency than the U.S. dollar. Now, what is really important here, this is another war for oil. And everybody wants to play. Now, Venezuela's current oil company is state-owned, and its profits are used to try and build a better life for the Venezuelan people. But Venezuela has been the target of economic warfare for decades, going all the way back to Hugo Chavez. And Donald Trump just now was making the point about how Venezuela used to be rich, but now they're so poor, without mentioning that that was an intentional policy by the United States, which likes to weaponize currencies and banks. But apparently there is another prize at stake here, and it's to the east of the Orinoco heavy oil fields where all the oil companies are now operating. There are huge oil reserves of a disputed area straddling Venezuela, Guyana, and Brazil. It's called Guyana Essequiba, and some geologists believe the Essequiba region and its offshore could contain the world's largest reserves of oil of far better quality than the heavy Orinoco crude of Venezuela. But because of all the hostility and the fact that the area is disputed, the exact extent of the oil is not yet known. But there's a... Okay. All right. Now then, as you know, Mike Pompeo is already out there with the big lie to sell you the war with Venezuela. We got to go on down there. You know, Hezbollah is down there. Why would Hezbollah be in South America? So, It is. It's Saddam's nukes all over again. Maduro has Hezbollah. Maduro has Iran. Maduro has a Death Star. They're just going to keep on laying it on. This is just another in a long list of U.S. coups against democracy, going all the way back to 1846 when the United States invaded Mexico and captured Mexico City. In 1903, the U.S. engineered Panamanian independence from Colombia and then gained sovereign rights over the zone where the canal would later be built. In 1903, again after the Spanish and American War, Cuba and the U.S. signed a treaty allowing near total U.S. control of Cuban affairs. That's back when the U.S. established the naval base at Guantanamo Bay. The U.S. Marines repeatedly intervened in Central America and Caribbean throughout the first quarter of the 20th century, often to protect U.S. business interests, just as Smedley Butler said was the case here. 1914, U.S. troops occupied the Mexican port of Veracruz for 7 months in an attempt to sway developments in the Mexican Revolution. 1954, Guatemalan President Jacobo Arbenz is overthrown in a CIA-backed coup. 1961, of course, we all remember the Bay of Pigs was an attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro. That one fell flat on its face. Not all of these attempts are successful. 1964, leftist President João Goulart of Brazil is overthrown in a U.S.-backed coup that installs a military dictatorship that lasted until the 1980s. 1965, U.S. forces land in the Dominican Republic to intervene in their civil war. 1973, we've talked about this one before, a U.S.-supported military coup overthrows the democratically elected president of Chile, Salvador Allende. And he's replaced by General Augusto Pinochet, who imposes a brutal military regime and embarks on a U.S.-guided program of extreme economic privatization and deregulation. It is later seen as the laboratory for what became known as neoliberalism. 1970s, Argentina, Chile, and allied South American nations launch a brutal campaign of repression and assassination aimed at perceived leftist threats known as Operation Condor with U.S. support. 1980s, the Reagan administration backs anti-communist Contra forces against Nicaragua's Sandinista government and backs the Salvadoran government against leftist FMLN rebels. This, of course, is wherein the Clintons came in. Iran-Contra, all the gun and drug running. That's where that was happening here. U.S. forces invade the Caribbean island of Grenada after accusing the government of allying itself with Cuba. That was a very thin excuse. The real reason they attacked on that particular day was to distract everybody from the barracks bombing in Beirut, Lebanon, which had happened just the day before. 1989, U.S. invades Panama to oust strongman and rogue CIA agent Manuel Noriega. His mistake was that he tried to blackmail the Bush family over the fact that they were using Panama for refueling for their little airplanes going from Arkansas down to Nicaragua and back. Guns one way, drugs another. 1994, a U.S.-led invasion of Haiti is launched to remove the government installed by a 1991 coup that had ousted President Jean-Bertrand Aristide. The invasion restores Aristide, who was later overthrown again by a U.S.-backed coup in 2004. Come on, guys, make up your minds. 2002, Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez is ousted for 2 days in a U.S.-backed coup before retaking power following a massive outpouring of popular support. 2009, Honduran President Manuel Zelaya overthrown by the military in a U.S.-supported coup. That's where this list ends, but obviously we've seen coups since then, such as Ukraine and such as what's being attempted in Syria and was accomplished in Iraq. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And U.S. is now mobilizing allies to blame Russia for the dismantling of the INF Treaty. So here it is. Donald Trump gets up and says, we're pulling out of the INF treaty. You made us do it. And again, the U.S. is claiming that Russia's 9M729 cruise missile violates the terms of the treaties. And Russia keeps saying, come and take a look at it. We'll let you check it out. And the U.S. is saying, no, we don't need to check it out. We already know. We went to Miss Cleo. She got out her Ouija board and said, Russia is cheating on the INF. And the United States has been cheating on the INF as well. But this is more of the blame Russia. Russia's the villain. Russia's the bad guy. Meanwhile, there's these continuing tit-for-tat accusations between Moscow and Washington, which have this may threaten the future of the New START treaty. We had an old START treaty. That one went away. Russia and Washington have been talking about a new one, a new strategic arms limitation treaty. And Russia is now touting its new nuclear cruise missile, the 9M730 Burevestnik, or Storm Petrel. It's in the final stages of testing and development. I would sure like to know exactly how that engine works. I think I do. Anyway. So the Kremlin is claiming the nuclear-powered, nuclear-tipped cruise missile has unlimited range and advanced superior maneuvering capabilities against air defenses. Russian media previously last week reported, based on official state sources, that the missile's nuclear power unit was successfully tested in January of 2018. Alrighty. Getting on over to that Warsaw summit. It was a disaster for Trump, partly by all the extreme stuff that was coming out from Bolton and Pompeo. But Netanyahu came on out looking good. But again, it was bad for the United States here. All right. Israel is about to start screaming anti-Semite, and we can expect a huge surge in fake anti-Semitic hate crime hoaxes, because next month the United Nations is going to be releasing a record number of reports criticizing Israel. And one of these reports will accuse the military of war crimes over its response to protests by Palestinians on the Gaza border. And other reports will accuse Israel of human rights violations in the Golan Heights and in territories claimed by the Palestinians for a future state. So, yeah, get ready to see a whole bunch of hate crime hoaxes here. As you know, the House of Representatives issued a stinging rebuke of Trump's holding pattern in support of the Saudi coalition in Yemen. And the vote was the culmination of years of efforts by realists on Capitol Hill and their allies. The optics on Yemen are bad. Everybody knows that the U.S. goaded Saudi Arabia to do this, and they're pouring in huge money. So the House of Representatives basically passed a resolution to say, we're ending the funding for Yemen, for Saudi Arabia. No more. And it's expected Trump may veto it. That would be his first veto in office. Over in Gibraltar, because of the upcoming Brexit, a Spanish warship sailed next to Gibraltar, which Spain claims is theirs. Britain claims it's an overseas territory. And the Spanish warship ordered commercial vessels to leave Gibraltar waters. That is going to provoke a diplomatic backlash, and I don't think it was appropriate for Spain to do that. I think they should have settled for a freedom of navigation exercise. And the world has one more flashpoint to worry about now, and that is Pakistan versus India in an argument over Kashmir. And apparently there's been another ongoing gun battle in Kashmir. 7 people, including 2 armed rebels and 4 Indian Army soldiers, have been killed. Now, this is just days after 42 Indian security personnel were killed in a suicide blast, the worst such attack in 30 years of Kashmir conflict, which is raising the possibility of open war between these two, and I should remind everybody, they are both nuclear armed. They're also not signers to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. So there is apparently this operation against the rebels, and India wants Kashmir, and they've actually been losing it slowly over time, but they are in fact losing it. But everybody's pointing fingers at Pakistan. Pakistan is saying we had nothing to do with this. There's a terror group that has taken credit for the attack, and the rationale is, oh, Pakistan is aiding and abetting terrorists, therefore it's Pakistan's fault, which sounds to me like somebody really does want there to be yet another war in that part of the world. But there's another group that people should be looking at, and that is the Kashmiris themselves. That argument over Kashmir has been going on for 70 years. And the people of Kashmir, they're tired of it. They want it to stop. They want to go back to being their own country. They want a referendum, is what they want. A referendum where they can choose, do they want to be part of Pakistan? Do they want to be part of India? Or do they want to be their own country? And so I would say that this terrorist group who carried this out is probably Kashmiri. But you never let a crisis go to waste. Oh, yes, let's stir up more war between India and Pakistan. So India is already going down the road of economic war against Pakistan, and they're heading into the Financial Action Task Force plenary meeting in Paris. Actually, it's underway right now. And of course, India is out there screaming that Pakistan is not doing enough to curb money laundering and terror financing. And they're providing a safe, the usual. Anyway, but this Kashmir attack could spark a new military confrontation in South Asia. Is it time to call it a world war yet? And as a matter of fact, the militant attack in India-ruled Kashmir has once again put New Delhi and Islamabad on a war footing. And it is a setback for those who have been working for years trying to bring peace to the region. John Bolton, of course, couldn't manage to stay out of this one. He's pledging U.S. support for India's heavy price response. India is saying that they're going to respond to this suicide attack with a heavy price against Pakistan. So it does sound like war is on the horizon there as well. Okay. Now, here's a little interesting bit of news. The Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, has ordered 2,100 Pakistani prisoners released during the Crown Prince's high-profile visit to Islamabad. So the U.S. may be on the side of India, but Saudi Arabia is clearly on the side of Pakistan. So everybody's changing sides here. But apparently Saudi Arabia has signed investment agreements with Pakistan worth $20 billion. Another way that India is thumbing its nose at Pakistan is they have raised the import duty 200% on Pakistani goods. And this will lead to drastic price increases of imported goods, fresh fruits, cement, petroleum products, and mineral ore. Who's going to pay that? The people of India. India itself is basically on alert, if you will, out of concern that there might be attacks by Indians on Kashmiris who live in India, study in India. And so India's Interior Ministry has issued an advisory to all states to ensure that the Kashmiris' safety and security and maintain communal harmony. Alrighty. Iranian Parliament Speaker Ali Larijani says Islamabad should account for the recent bloody terrorist attack in Iran's southeast, as the assault was plotted on and launched from Pakistani soil. That is a very weak case. But they're saying Pakistan must be held accountable. I mean, things happen on soil that you have no control over. Look at the U.S. presence in Syria. If the U.S. goes on out and kills a bunch of civilians from those bases in Syria, why is the Syrian government accountable? The answer is it isn't. This terrorist group, or Kashmiri group, are operating outside of the authority of Pakistan. But it looks like everybody's getting ready to pile on for another regional war. Over in Haiti, as you know, there are huge riots going on. The Haitian people are tired of being kept poor. They're tired of all these multinational corporations coming on in, scooping up all their land, building expensive resorts. And apparently, they want the U.S.-backed president out, and they want the Russians to intervene. Not going to happen, but it shows how the world is shifting. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Okay, because of all the unrest in Haiti, the U.S. State Department has urged all American citizens out of the country and issued a do not travel advisory due to the crime and civil unrest. Well, they made a mess of that place. All right, so let's talk about the economic news. As you know, today being President's Day, the banks and the stock market are closed here. But we are seeing more and more indications that we are heading into a recession. And one of the red flags is that subprime borrowers are defaulting on their loans. Why do we even have subprime borrowers? Did we not learn anything back in 2008? That's what I want to know. Well, Wall Street didn't learn anything. They didn't have to. You know, except for Lehman Brothers, and they're gone now. But the U.S. government stepped on in true fascist economic fashion and bailed out the banks and Wall Street on the backs of the American taxpayers. So, of course, Wall Street's going to say, well, yeah, let's do the subprime thing again. You know, more money. If it all falls apart, you know, our buddies over in the government, they'll save us again here. Right now, the majority of small business owners think the recession is coming this year. And again, there are many indicators. So this leads to the question, what happens when more quantitative easing fails to reverse the recession? Well, part of the problem, of course, is that all this quantitative easing never benefited the American people. It was always being poured all over the banks and the stock market. But the Federal Reserve's sudden return to accommodative dovishness telegraphs its intent to fire up quantitative easing once the recession kicks into gear. Because we have to protect the banks, after all. I mean, the American people, they'll take care of themselves, you know, but we've got to take care of the banks here. But that's pretty much the only thing the Federal Reserve can do. If there's any sign of weakness in stocks or the economy, they just start pouring out the money again. And again, using the petrodollar is the only way to keep the value of the dollar up internationally. So you can see the corner that Wall Street and Washington, D.C. have painted the nation into. Now, a lot of people are commenting on the fact that the U.S. national debt, that's the government's debt, has surpassed the $22 trillion mark for the first time. And that's not a good thing. And ultimately, it could jeopardize the economic security of every single American, although right now a large percentage of Americans are not economically secure. Now, that $22 trillion debt is the known accounted for debt, if you will. Behind that are the unfunded mandates, and they go up over 100 trillion. Then you have all the state debt, then you have consumer debt, and it's all because of this private central banking system that just creates money out of thin air and loans it into circulation at interest, and it's a mechanism of enslavement. It's a mechanism to transfer the real wealth of the nation out of the pockets of the people whose labor creates that wealth and into the pockets of the bankers here. Supposedly, trade talks with China are about to resume, but it's getting really kind of testy because the U.S. is confronting China in so many other areas. You have, first of all, the trade war. That's in the headlines. Then you've got the U.S. pushing back against the bases the Chinese are building in the South China Sea. You've got the U.S. Navy is sending ships provocatively close to them. And right now, this confrontation between the U.S. and China spreads all the way from Greenland to Argentina. And apparently, the Trump administration succeeded in turning back a Chinese plan to help bankroll and build 3 airports. And the Pentagon is actually offered to invest in Greenland's airport infrastructure. So China's trying to make deals. And now the U.S. is openly interfering with those deals. That's not going to make China happy at all. And my concern here, from where I sit, is the United States is an empire in decline. Wrecked. A really great nation through all of their corruption and bad judgment, that they may just sort of lash out in all directions. And that'll be a bad day. Got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're talking about the economy, but I want to back up here to the Jussie Smollett case. Because the Chicago police are saying the investigation has shifted. They want another interview with him. And it's, again, interesting to see how the corporate media that first ran with this story unquestioningly is dealing with this. And some are now saying, well, we're going to withhold judgment till more facts come in. Others are not even reporting the possibility this is a hoax. And they still, the 2 guys who quote unquote attacked Jussie Smollett told the police that they were all friends and that he paid them $3,500. They told the police the store the rope was bought from. It's another classic hate crime hoax. And of course, those who perpetuate hate crime hoaxes are anxious for this story to go away because it reminds everybody that not every hate crime is what it seems to be. They're there to attract attention for political gain, or in this case, career gain here. Getting on back to the economic news. Honda is getting ready to close its Swindon plant in 2022. 3,500 jobs will be gone. And the motoring union is blaming Theresa May for chaotic Brexit uncertainty. I don't know. I think by 2022, the dust will have settled from Brexit here. Iranian authorities, together with 4 local banks and Gognos, I hope that's how it's pronounced, have launched the Paymon cryptocurrency backed by gold reserves, aiming to bypass international sanctions. Now, no other country has ever used gold reserves to back a cryptocurrency. And Paymon is expected to be presented on the Iranian Farah Bourse OTC securities market. Okay, Germany is standing firm on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline project, saying there's no way back. I mean, much of it has already been built. It's not like they're going to say, oh, the deal's canceled, let's go rip up the pipeline. And Germany needs the Russian gas. And the United States is just stamping its foot and throwing a tantrum. The United States apparently wants the authority to tell other countries who they may and may not do business with. And the other countries aren't listening anymore. Now, Italy is dealing with a lot of financial hardship right now, and so the government has decided they want to sell some of their gold. It turns out there may be a problem that Italy, like so many other places, trusted foreign banks and gold deposits with their gold, and it may not still be there. And it reminds everybody the Bank of England is still refusing to return sovereign nations' gold when the nations ask for it, and saying, can we settle for cash? And that's a red flashing sign. And you have to look at all the gold that's been flowing into Russia and China. Where's it all coming from? Mining output is at an all-time low. Did somebody really succeed in robbing Fort Knox? And remember, Fort Knox has not been audited. When issues were raised about whether there was gold in Fort Knox right after Nixon ended gold convertibility, they held a press conference inside Fort Knox where they opened one door that had a wall of gold bricks behind it, but nobody was allowed to touch it or to test it or to assay it to see how real it was. And don't forget, some of those gold-covered tungsten bars that were found in Germany had hallmarks from Fort Knox on it. All right. Let's turn to immigration and refugees. The situation there is getting very tense. Down in Texas, the border agents keep catching rapists, child molesters, and gang members, but the Democrats just don't care. Now, apparently, last week, U.S. Border Patrol agents in the Rio Grande Valley apprehended a Guatemalan illegally crossing into the U.S. He had a prior conviction in New Jersey for sexually assaulting a child. That same day, they also caught a Salvadoran who turned out to be a member of the violent MS-13 gang. The next day, they caught another Guatemalan who was a member of MS-13. Now, interestingly enough, last night, Claire and I watched this documentary on TV about MS-13, and I was rather surprised to find out it originated here in the United States of America. And, of course, it's one of just many gangs that plague our inner cities, but it is the most violent. And, of course, Trump made them stars in his State of the Union speech. But they are very violent, and they control a lot of drugs, and they're bad for the community. And apparently they spread from the United States down into Central America. And now they're starting to come on back. In fact, the presence of MS-13 in some of those Central American countries is stated as being one of the reasons all those Central Americans want to come to the United States. All well and good, except we have MS-13 here in the United States. So I'm not sure if that makes much sense. Ultimately, this is probably going to wind up in the United States Supreme Court. And it may be that the people filing all these legal challenges know they're ultimately going to use, but it can take years to get a case all the way to the Supreme Court unless it's agreed to be fast-tracked. And that means years more of open borders and illegal immigrants pouring on in. Now, remember what I said to that caller earlier, Trump may not get his wall after all, because his emergency declaration was counting on Defense Department money, which was supposed to be unallocated and not being spent. But apparently there wasn't that much of it. So Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan said this weekend he will make the final call on the $3.6 billion in military construction money that President Trump wants to build his border wall. And he shot down the notion of raiding any funds meant to build or repair housing for troops and their families. So Republicans are starting to get upset that certain key military projects on which they are politically dependent might see budget cuts. And that's going to put the Republicans in a bit of a bind because they support stronger military and a stronger southern border. And now, because of the way Trump got manipulated by the Congress, the two are now diametrically opposed at each other. But I think it's very arrogant for Shanahan to say that he's going to make that final call. He does work for the President of the United States of America. And if he refuses to come up with the money, Trump has every authority to fire him. Now, there's a lot of bad things in the spending bill, and one of the things that's in the spending bill, first of all, there are all kinds of loopholes in there that allow local jurisdictions to deny the border be built across their border with Mexico. So it's a porous border. It's going to have more holes than Swiss cheese. And apparently there's another provision in there that makes the deportation of illegal aliens virtually impossible. Well, what are you going to do with them? They're illegal. They're not supposed to be here. If we literally have a provision in that bill that says illegal aliens can stay here and not be deported, then we've just made them legal, which is, of course, what the Democrats want. They want them amnestied or legal or however to get them registered to vote, because that is going to be their base going into 2020. Now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came on out and showed us that she may be very pretty and very energetic and very young, but she's not really very sharp about history and border security, because she tried to make a comparison between our southern border wall and the Berlin Wall. And that's just completely nonsensical. It's also insulting for those who were oppressed in East Germany. All right. Now, here's a scary thought. As you know, Angela Merkel is getting ready to leave the chancellorship of Germany. But all of a sudden, there are rumblings coming along that she is being touted to replace Donald Tusk as the European Council president after the upcoming EU elections. So Angela Merkel is about to become the queen of Europe. And that means that the open border policy she'll push for that. She'll go after countries like Hungary who are controlling their borders. She'll go after them. Push for all of that here. Now, Sweden's minister has compared Hungary's new family assistance measures to Nazism. And specifically what he's referring to is this idea that Swedish families, if they have and raise 4 children, they'll be free from income taxes for life. And so, Hungary, this is in Hungary. And Sweden's foreign minister, Szijjártó, basically saying this is just like in Nazi Germany, where German mothers were encouraged to have more children. And yes, it's true, they were. There was actually a medal for it. It was called the Honor Cross of the German Mother, and it came in bronze, silver, and gold. And generally they went to the wives of SS officers. But if you had 3 children, you got the bronze medal. If you got 4 children, you got the silver one. And if you had 5 children, it's a lot of kids, you got the gold one. And with the medals came all kinds of state-sponsored events, picnics, preferential treatment on transportation, and so forth. But what's wrong with Hungary saying that we want more Hungarian children instead of immigrants? There really is nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong at all. Over in the Netherlands, Prime Minister Mark Rutte is basically coming on out supporting Theresa May by saying Great Britain is really too small to be a world player after Brexit, that it really should stay hooked up to the EU because just off by itself, it's just going to be this little tiny island in the Atlantic, and it won't amount to much, forgetting that at one time Great Britain pretty much did rule the entire world. But again, they're still trying to find a way to get this thing to derail. And he's saying, Great Britain is going to be too small to appear on the world stage on its own. My response to that was this quote from Milton from Paradise Lost: "It's better to rule in hell than serve in heaven." Okay. Terry Christian is taking some backlash after claiming he knows employers planning to sack Brexit voting employees and urging other bosses to do the same. Well, I would assume that British elections are as private as our own, and probably smart Britons aren't saying which way they voted, or if they're being challenged by their employer, they might be lying. But I mean, this idea that British employers are going to start sacking workers who support Brexit. I don't know the laws in Great Britain. I would think that that would have to be something that was indeed illegal. Getting into the world of political correctness, or actually Israel correctness here. Virgin Atlantic had a meal on their in-flight menu called Palestinian couscous salad, a mix of maftoul and other couscous, tomatoes, and cucumbers seasoned with parsley, mint, and lemon vinaigrette. And it was called Palestinian couscous salad. And of course, Jewish passengers complained because Virgin was being a terrorist sympathizer. And so Virgin Atlantic has changed the menus to simply say couscous salad. It's exactly the same salad, by the way. Don't you get sick of the whiners? Just whine, 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 whine. Oh, we don't want to see the word Palestinian. Anyway. More on the world of political correctness. Former Wimbledon champion Martina Navratilova is drawing fire for comments that she made saying that allowing transgender women to compete in women's sporting tournaments was insane and it was cheating. And they're criticizing Martina Navratilova by saying, well, look, these transgender women, they are required to take drugs to lower their testosterone levels so that, in theory at least, they're the physical equal of the real biological women. Well, so far that hasn't been the case. We've been seeing all of these events, bicycling and so forth, where the transgender women are winning by huge, huge margins. And now we have this case for this women's 800-meter champion, Kashmir Attack, who is actually fighting rules regarding lowering testosterone levels. Now, this is a 28-year-old South African, and apparently she's up at the Court of Arbitration for Sport in Lausanne, Switzerland. They expect a judgment at the end of March. But if they come on out and say that transgender women are not required to take these testosterone-lowering drugs, girls are going to quit sports completely. They're not going to have a chance. There's going to be a men's division and a transgender division, and that's going to be it. Meanwhile, out in Los Angeles, their contractors must disclose if they have ties with the National Rifle Association to get city contracts. See, it started with this supporting boycott, divestment, sanctions. Now it's spreading. These city governments are going to try and control the political behavior of contractors by denying them contracts, which actually, if I think about it, that's a violation of the USA Patriot Act. To try and coerce a change in somebody's political view is defined as an act of terror. All right, we're going to take another commercial break here. We'll be right back after these few words. It would help if I turned up the volume. So, welcome back to the show. And we've gotten through most of the really important, serious news here, so we're going to go ahead and open up the phone lines. Now, police are starting to play around with a new weapon in their arsenals. It's called the pepperball gun. And basically, it's a modified paintball gun, but inside the balls, instead of paint, they have high-test pepper spray. And police are saying this is a new, less than lethal way of dealing with those who are armed with anything less than a gun and refuse to comply with police directives. St. Paul, Minnesota is the latest police department considering implementation of the weapon. The hope is this will reduce incidents of excessive force. I certainly hope that that's going to be the case. Okay, out in California, still talking about how the high-speed rail project has been pretty much gutted. There's still an argument going on between the California governor and President Trump about some $3 billion in federal funding, which Trump thinks ought to be returned. But one of the problems is that there'd been a lot of construction along the proposed route, And some of the stations are already built. One of them costs $200 million. And because the train isn't going to go through there anymore, I don't know what they're going to do with it, turn it into a giant greenhouse or something. But this was badly planned and badly managed. And we've got the same problem with our light rail project here. As a matter of fact, we have a local group called Grassroots, basically saying that, yeah, we're seeing exactly the same thing. The rail project was sold with promises of low budget and speedy construction, and it just didn't happen. And now they're simply pulling the plug on it. And there's a lot of people around here don't think we'll ever actually see this train work. And we'll have this concrete scar across the southern part of our beautiful island for forever and ever. Okay, let's talk about Michael Moore. You know, sometimes you got to love him, sometimes you don't. I loved Roger and Me. I loved Canadian Bacon. I hated, Bowling for Columbine. I mean, he is a hardcore liberal. And he's not doing as well as he used to. His anti-Trump film Fahrenheit 11/9 floundered in theaters, and now apparently his docu-series, Michael Moore Live from the Apocalypse, has been canceled. So that may be a sign of a shift here. Chinese state media is warning of an impending high-tech Cold War fueled by AI competition. This is in response to Trump's executive order instructing the U.S. government to prioritize the development of artificial intelligence. I think they ought to actually make coding more robust and error-free before they go that direction, but that's just me. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. So before the break, we were doing this story about how Chinese state media warns of impending high-tech Cold War fueled by AI competition. I have to be very honest, and with all due respect to Donald Trump and everybody out there working in AI, I'm a little less impressed than probably a lot of other people are. And probably most people's idea of artificial intelligence is based on what they see in movies, like 2001, and remember how that one turned out, or the Terminator series, or even iRobot. But I have a fundamental question about AI. AI, as it's implemented today, simply means software that is able to learn on its own and build up a database on which it will make future decisions, which sounds all well and good. But what if the AI is learning something wrong or is coming to the wrong conclusion? There doesn't seem to be a check. And the reason I think this is because I have the Weather Channel app on my smartphone, and every time it pops on up, down at the bottom is a little banner using IBM's Watson, which is IBM's AI system. And lately, the forecasts are just, they're useless past a few hours out. And they're constantly changing. And if this is what AI is going to do, I question its usability here. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Joe in California. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. First, did you get snow in Hawaii?
Yes, we did. Of course, we get snow in Hawaii every winter at the tops of the volcanoes on the Big Island and on Haleakala in Maui. But this time, the snow just came down to a record low level. They had to close the road to Haleakala. One of the state parks was just covered in this stuff. And so, yeah, it was a record snow here in Hawaii.
Wow. Mike, I have a great idea for what California can, how they can utilize those abandoned stations. Now that project has been canceled, they can house migrants. Divide them up into separate living quarters, bring in some nice luxury appliances, maybe put in some jacuzzis in there, make them feel at home.
I'd rather do that for homeless Americans.
Of course, but
California, I'm sure will probably go with my suggestion.
Well, when I saw the photo of this station, and it's architecturally beautiful, and the first thing I thought is, was it really necessary to build it this way as opposed to a simple, functional train station?
And is it true that you said that Senator Feinstein's husband was awarded one of the contracts?
Yep.
Oh, that's awful. That's awful. Mike, I was listening to somebody. I think it was something I read online. I think it was from a British tourist who visited San Francisco, and he was writing how appalling, how horrific the situation is there with the homeless, the druggies, the people pissing in the streets and all. The people who live, I don't know how these people, I guess these people who live in these big cities like San Francisco, LA, I think you mentioned Denver last week. I guess these people are so ideologically committed, brainwashed, that even they who live in these cities, they won't complain. Because by complaining, they'll be admitting that they were wrong all along.
That's certainly one aspect of it, but the other one is that this transition from clean, beautiful cities to what we are seeing today took place over a very, very long time. And you've heard the expression boiling the frog slowly. That's what's been happening here. This didn't happen overnight. If it had, I'm sure people would be up in arms saying, what the heck happened? But they were just getting used to it day after day after day.
Right. Well, this goes back to the Immigration Act of 1965. You're talking about boiling the frog, where at that time they said, oh, this would not have a significant impact on the demographics of the country. So people just went along with it. So it started back in 1965.
Well, don't forget, a large part of the problem we're dealing with are not the legal immigrants, but the illegal immigrants, which, according to some estimates, number in the millions. And a lot of them are in Southern California.
Yeah, Mike, and I have to say this, and I don't want this to be taken the wrong way from the viewers or by you, but, Donald Trump in his State of the Union was talking about he wants more and more and more legal immigration. I'm with Gerald Celente. I'm against all immigration at this point. I think we need time to integrate those who are already here. Of course, I'm against the illegal immigration. I believe the border should be secure, the wall should be built, but I'm against all legal immigration.
Well, I think it should certainly be cut back. I mean, if there is somebody in another country who has a skill set that we don't have here, then by all means, let them in here. But, Trump is basically pandering to his corporate donors by bringing in more legal immigrants to take white-collar jobs, to drive wages and salaries down. And it's a very foolhardy situation at a time when the national debt just went through $22 trillion to be driving down wages and salaries and therefore taxes. And remember, big corporations don't pay a lot of taxes. I think Amazon paid zero. You can see where the lines are going to cross at some point.
Yeah. Well, of course, the progressives, they've given up on the working man. I mean, people like Jimmy Dore, who I really like what he says when it comes to these wars, he's all for these people coming into the country. So, I mean, that goes against his whole progressive argument of defending the working man and arguing for higher wages. Well, how are you going to get higher wages with this flow, this deluge coming into the country?
Yeah, absolutely. None of it. I mean, if you really step back and actually look at it all very carefully as a whole, it doesn't make sense. There are too many parts that just don't match with the other, and in many ways, the country is already breaking up.
Yeah, and then Mike, going back to this hoax, this Jesse, I forgot his last name, the one who
Jesse
did
Smollett.
this hoax in Chicago. Yeah, the media just forgets about it. It goes down the memory hole. It's the same thing. What happened with the Israeli kid who was calling in all these threats to the synagogues and other Jewish agencies. The media just forgot about it. It's like that never happened.
It's going to be a little harder this time. It's going to be a little harder this time because of Jussie Smollett's star value. That is going to keep this story alive. And, and certainly in the independent media, we're going to keep this story alive because it is a reminder. You should never accept the claim of a hate crime at face value. You should wait until you actually have the facts. And I mean, there have been so many of these over the past, the Tawana Brawley hate crime hoax, all the rape hoaxes that were taking place in the 1990s. And it tells you that you got to be very careful about what you're being told. It's also, unfortunately, a rather bad portrait of the American people that so many would engage in such behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's see if it impacts his career. I don't think it will.
Well, he was already being written out of the show, and if he is sent to prison, I think it's going to be very hard to get to a casting session from there.
Well, he should be sent to prison. Look at the resource hours that were wasted.
Yes.
With the Chicago police. He should be sent to prison, at least. Oh, Mike, last question. I got in a little late. I saw that aid for Venezuela. I don't know what it was, 900 tons of. Was there any update on that as far as, is it actually food and medicine?
Well, there's two different aid deliveries. The U.S. delivered 200 tons of aid to Colombia, right near the Venezuelan border. Maduro is convinced it's actually weapons and supplies for paramilitary groups. But Venezuela also got 990 tons of real humanitarian aid from all their allies from places like Russia and China. And a lot of it is mostly like medications and that kind of things.
Oh, okay. That's probably what I read. Okay. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Okay. And we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. As it turns out, Facebook's automated ad approval system can be tricked. And an Al Jazeera investigation found that it is possible to buy ads to spread misinformation and fake news, and that somebody was doing just that ahead of the Nigeria elections. Now, last month, Facebook said it would temporarily disallow political ads targeting Nigeria from being purchased outside the country in an attempt to prevent foreign influence in the elections, which happened actually like Friday. But basically the ads Al Jazeera was able to get Facebook to approve included a false claim that armed group Boko Haram would take part in the elections. So all these automated systems, they're not really very good. And we're moving into AI. When you mix the ideas of artificial intelligence with sloppy coding, you're just asking for something horrible to happen here. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Mo in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. How you doing?
Doing fine.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I just, you're just a drink of cool water in the desert.
Yep.
Just hearing your voice, you're very calm, and I just share so many same things with you. I grew up the same way. I was raised Catholic. You were raised Catholic, right?
No, I was raised Congregational. My father was Catholic, and my family was Catholic all the way back to the 1490s, and before that, we were Jewish.
Oh yeah, I do remember that. We both grew up walking with our freaking 22s and shotguns out, and
yes,
so I totally relate to all that. We're about the same age. But, I was just going to throw something quick, just kind of a little levity. But, I know you probably saw this George Mendonça, 95, died. He had that the iconic photo kissing that nurse, whatever it was, after World War II was over.
Yes.
You remember that? Obviously, everybody knows that photo, right?
Yeah. There were two different women claimed to be the girl in the picture.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yep.
But, whatever it was, the thing I was just going to say, and I'll let you go and get the rest of your phone calls, but, I just was thinking, if that was done today, there'd be multiple lawsuits filed for sexual harassment.
Yeah, the world has changed
Can you
so
imagine?
drastically, you know, and there was another article that was out there saying, political correctness has ended comedy, which is why what passes for comedy is basically just screeching about Donald Trump from a stage, and that we have become such an intolerant nation, but we're being indoctrinated to be offended by everything and everybody for political gain, to keep us divided and constantly hostile with each other. And we need to learn how to stop being offended and just go back to being relaxed and saying, okay, that's your opinion.
Mike, can't you find a place that we can all go to and just like live free?
Not until the next Starship shows up.
New Hampshire, I don't know how that worked out, but I mean, it's just ridiculous. There's no freedom anymore. You know, I mean, it's just everything is like you say, politically, you got to be politically correct. Everybody's offended by everything.
Yep.
Just how ridiculous is that? You know.
It is. It's completely ridiculous, and it's engineered. You know, we, the American people, did not decide to become this population of overly sensitive, finger pointers. It was sold to us. We were encouraged to be that way. It was held up as a new social ideal to run around being constantly offended by everything.
You know, that's so true. You know, I'm hanging in there. You know, but my biggest letdown was, I campaigned for Ron Paul, and that was, I cannot think of very few things I disagree with you about, and of course Ron Paul. Can you imagine if that guy would have if he, they didn't kill him, if he would have become president? Is there anything about Ron Paul that you disagree with?
Not really. I wanted him to become president, but again, I don't know how he would have fared against the deep state. I hate to use this kind of language, but we almost need a strong man as president, somebody who can push back against the deep state and say, stop doing that. We don't have that with Donald Trump, who I would say is my greatest political disappointment.
Yeah, me too. I'm right with you. He's Zionist-controlled, Sheldon Adelson, the whole bit, and it just makes me sick. It makes me sick because they get your hopes up and then they slam them down. But
yep.
Mike, you're out there. You're on the front lines there, and I appreciate everything you do. And I hope you go on for another 20 years. So thank you, brother.
Well, that would be very, very, very nice. But I'm going to be 66 here this year, so I don't know if I've got 20 years left in me. But I'll just go as long as I can.
A lot of people hope you do.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the kind words, and thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Getting on back to the world of computers and the world of Facebook. Apparently, Facebook has been caught tracking users and ex-employees it considers represents threats. They actually have a BOLO list. Be on the lookout. And it's very Big Brother-esque, even for the social media giant. But apparently Facebook mines its own network for threatening comments, according to CNBC, and uses location data from apps installed on the phones of those users in order to track them. Now, any user who publicly threatens Facebook by showing up repeatedly on company property, penning long email threats, or even posting improper comments in response to public missives from Zuckerberg can end up on Facebook's BOLO list, which apparently is already hundreds long. And what's really a little more interesting and alarming is Facebook used a security app to spy on their competitors. Facebook used Onavo Virtual Private Network to gather information on their competitors. This may have been Facebook knowingly violating both data privacy and anti-competition laws. Now, as you know, there's been a big brouhaha, if you will, over 5G. And there's a lot of money at stake. And some of the nation's cell phone providers have accepted the new reality, and they're already starting to convert their networks over. And all those cell phone companies that don't have the money to do so and are going to be left behind in 4G twilight zone or limbo. They're out there screaming, oh, 5G is going to melt your brain. 5G is going to make your hair fall out. 5G is do all these bad things. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that China, and especially Huawei, own a lot of the patents on these 5G products and chips. And the U.S. and Britain don't want to let them in because it's going to be what they see as competition to U.S.-produced chips that can't compete. So they're basically accepting we're not the manufacturing power we used to be. Now we rely on protectionism. We're going to keep those other guys out. We're going to make sure that the American people have less than the best on planet Earth because that's the way that we'll go on making money out of them. But there's been a major blow to U.S. efforts to persuade allies to ban Huawei from high-speed telecommunication systems. The U.S. has been claiming that Huawei has built Chinese espionage software into their 5G chips. And Britain came on out and pulled the rug out from under that one, saying that Huawei is a manageable risk to the 5G rollout. Now, probably what Britain is simply deciding is it's a choice between Chinese spying on us or the U.S. spying on us. I think we're going to go with China spying on us. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're still talking about computers. And here's another story about artificial intelligence. There's this project backed by Elon Musk. And apparently, research group OpenAI developed a large-scale unsupervised language model that is able to generate news stories from a simple headline. Now, I'm not exactly sure where it's getting the body of the news article for. Maybe it's going out on the net and looking for information. But apparently, this system has been deemed too dangerous to release. And they've unveiled a smaller version purely for research purposes. You know, I hate to sound like a Luddite, and I've spent my life with computers, and I like computers when they're working and when the software is bug-free. But I think, like with pharmaceuticals, these technologies are being developed and pushed onto the market before they're really, really ready. Let's take another phone call from Jim in Chicago. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Michael, regarding this so-called hate crime, I live in a city, and I didn't believe it from day one because it happened on a Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the morning, and that particular time, the temperature was 29 degrees below zero. And now this guy claims he left his hotel or his apartment to get a sandwich. There's a thing called a delivery service. And
Yes.
not only that, he claimed that these guys had some rope. Michael, how many people do you know that carry rope around them unless they live in Texas?
True. That's a good point.
Yeah, because what I mean by that, I'm talking about cowboys, ranchers that might carry rope with them. So I never believed it, and I thought the guy, I don't know, he wants more publicity, but
That's exactly what he wanted. He was being written out of the TV show, and he thought that getting some publicity might convince the executive producer to change mind and say, yeah, let's keep him on.
Well, you know what? I hope he goes to jail because apparently the Chicago police, they're going to have a grand jury session regarding this.
Yeah.
So, and the final thing, I am so glad you brought up Allende today, because when I see the situation in Venezuela, it reminds me of what happened in 1973, where the American CIA, the State Department, and the president decided to go down there and get rid of Allende. And the funny thing about it, though, during that time, it was the height of Watergate. Now, I don't know if Trump, well, maybe he decided to do this before the investigation, but it seems like history is repeating itself again.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's been an ongoing, continuous pattern of the United States government doing this to other countries, going back for most of our history. And the difference is back then, the American people weren't aware it was going on because they trusted the press, the newspapers, later the radio and TV, when they were told that, oh, we're bringing democracy into these people. They're living under this cruel tyrant of a dictator. And today, of course, Americans have access to other sources of information. You know, like the fact that Maduro won his election honestly last year, with international observers saying it was one of the most honest and transparent elections possible. You know, better than what we have here in the United States.
Right. You know, and it's kind of funny also. Like on 60 Minutes, the guy was talking about getting rid of Trump by using the 25th Amendment. America has been doing that since the 1800s. You know, going into another country and getting rid of their leaders. So this is nothing new.
Well, I think it's maybe the second time. Well, no. How many of our presidents have been assassinated? Yeah, occasionally, every once in a while, the deep state regime changes our own country. And that's certainly what they did to John F. Kennedy. And it certainly looks like that's what they were trying to do to Donald Trump. I'm waiting for Donald Trump to lose his temper on this stuff. And I know it's bad form for a president to get angry, and you should never make decisions when you're angry, but I wish he'd show some kind of a reaction other than a tweet. I mean,
well, you would think so.
I mean, especially now that we know 2 of his own cabinet people were on board with this plan.
Right. Well, I still believe that Donald Trump is being blackmailed. He's not in charge, and maybe that's why he's not responding. Because I know I will be very angry. I will have a press conference and using all kinds of language expressing my anger.
Yeah, I mean, Lindsey Graham is more upset about this than Donald Trump appears to be.
Right. So, well, Mike, I'm going to let you go. You take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And a very alert listener has just chastised me for forgetting how old I am. I'm actually 66 now. I'll be 67 later this year. So I think my watch is slow or something. Let's face it, I'm an old guy, and I have to deal with old guy stuff every once in a while. All right, we're going to take another commercial break here. We'll be back with another phone call and more about computers after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I just saw the most bizarre thing on Fox News. Apparently, the Army is way behind in their recruiting goals. And so they're trying a new tack now, which is to get out on social media and try and interact with potential recruits. And also they're releasing music videos of rap and hip hop. Far cry from America's Army, you know, but that's how desperate they are. I can't imagine any young person or the parent of any young person going along with this. We all know we're heading into more wars. Anyway. All right, let's take a couple more phone calls. Mark in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, before I get to what I wanted to ask you, I saw that I was at the gym earlier, and they had that, when I was doing my aerobic workouts there, I was watching it. They had that on Fox News there about the rapping. I was laughing. It was, they're not going to get millennials and Generation Z is smart enough. They get the news from people like you. They don't get the news from the fake news networks anymore. So they better figure something out before they wind up coming with a draft. And that's going to take down the country if they do that. But Mike, I want to ask you about that 5G. Okay.
Yes.
Really, I hear a lot about it, and from what I hear, it sounds like it's very dangerous.
Yeah, but as I said before, I think that is being put on out by the companies that have invested heavily in 4G and don't have the funds to upgrade.
Yeah, but I heard that you're going to upgrade all over the country, though.
Yeah, if you've got the money for the infrastructure. I'm not talking about people with cell phones. I'm talking about the actual cell phone companies themselves. They have invested a lot of money in the 4G infrastructure. They're probably still making payments on it. And they may simply be looking at the 5G upgrade as something they can't afford to do right now. And if their competitors upgrade to 5G, then they're going to lose a lot more business and they're going to be in trouble. So what do? You scare the public away from a better product that threatens your bottom line.
Yeah, but I'm hearing this not just I don't bother with the mainstream media anymore anyway. I'm hearing this more on alternate media, okay, on programs like yours, not you yourself, but programs like yours. That there's one thing after another. The danger of 5G. It'll attack your DNA.
Yeah, it's a propaganda campaign, and they're on social media, and they're calling into independent media shows because this is where the audience is.
It's not just callers. I mean, some of the shows, like you see on YouTube and stuff. Some of the people who got shows like yours coming out, including Alex Jones.
Oh, okay. Well, Mark, let me just put it to you this way. Okay, given the physics of radio waves, there is absolutely no reason for 5G to be any more of a problem than 4G.
You think 4G is bad for you? I mean, I use now. I'm all into this stuff the last few years, but I'm just wondering how healthy do you think this really is? Like using the Wi-Fi and all that, because you hear different things.
Well, that's why that's why I phrased that statement exactly the way I did. I didn't say that they were both perfectly safe. I'm saying there is no physics reason for 5G to be any worse than 4G is. Maybe a better way to say it here. I don't think we can point at any one source of radio energy, cell phone, the tablet, the Wi-Fi receiver, as a concern. But I am concerned about the total saturation of radio energy in which we live that is coming from everything around us. Amateur radio, radars, of which we have a lot of them here down here in Pearl Harbor, over-the-air broadcast of radio and TV. It's just this constant noise of radio energy, and at some point, I think there could be an issue. But when you look at how much money is based on the use of the radio spectrum, you're never going to get anybody to look at this seriously.
Yeah, but a regular AM and FM radio, or even your TV, like even your satellite TV or something, or cable TV, that doesn't, you're not getting radiation out of that.
No, but the radiation is coming from the broadcast tower. And we're talking, thousands and thousands of watts of power to get that signal into your radio or your TV set. Then you've got police radios, you've got handheld two-way walkie-talkies, even those little sensors over the door at the supermarket that open the door for you automatically. Those are radar units.
So in other words, one way or the other, what do you say we can do to protect ourselves?
Well, if you're rich enough to build a house that's a Faraday cage, I recommend it rather highly. In terms of using a cell phone, if you're concerned about putting that cell phone up to your ear, definitely think about using either the headset that came with it or getting a Wi-Fi earpiece. In the case of our Hyundai, we're very lucky. It's actually got a built-in Bluetooth phone. So when a call comes in, we don't even have to touch the cell phone. We just touch this little screen on the front of the thing, and it comes up, and we can talk and drive and not get a $300 ticket.
Yeah, I got that on my Hyundai also.
Yeah.
The other thing is I normally use the speakerphone. I don't put the phone up to my ear. I'm talking to you now on the speakerphone. I think it's coming in pretty good, right?
Well, I can tell that you're on a speakerphone.
Good.
Okay. Anyway, again, to reiterate, I think this rumor mongering about 5G being dangerous is a panic move by 4G cell phone providers who do not have the capitalization or simply do not wish to have to upgrade at this time. But some of the nation's biggest carriers, they've seen the writing on the wall, and they are starting the conversion right now. And it may be a big success. It may not. I got to be very honest. 4G works fine for me. 3G was a little slow and sketchy, but 4G works just fine for me. I think, if anything, it is the backbone behind all of these systems that is starting to log jam up with funny cat and videos and so forth. Anyway, Mark, we're going to let you go. We're getting close to the end of the show.
All right, Mike.
I want to switch over to Rick in Arizona. Rick, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Quickly on that 5G, I think what everybody's missing on is when that thing is up and running, when they got the repeaters on every block, they're going to know exactly where you are 24/7.
They already do that now. They already do that now.
Oh, it's an approximate. It's approximate.
Every cell phone. Hey, let me talk. Every cell phone.
I just called in, my man.
All right. Every cell phone has a GPS built in. And that GPS can be read over the cell phone system. That's the reality of life in the United States today. So. All right, we've got another caller on the line, Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Look, I'm 48 years old, and I'm around electronics all the time, and I'm still alive.
Yeah.
And you got to worry more about the wars.
The same here. I've been around some very intense electronics all of my life, including some of the stuff I worked with at NASA, that had warning stickers on it. And I'm fine now, outside of being 66 years old and holding. You
got to be worried more about using Roundup.
Oh, yeah.
What you eat, and 5G is about China. That's all it's about. It's about China. And Mike, I don't know if you heard the news with the UK is on the 5G with China now, because it seems like they're okay with the so-called security risks.
Yeah.
That the United States has been putting out. It's They can listen into you and all that, and the NSA can't.
Like American cell phones don't already have that. We know that the NSA is backdoor to every personal electronic item, going all the way back to Windows NT, and that includes the Mac and that includes Linux. I mean, you want to talk about being concerned about personal privacy? Forget about China. Our own government is the worst violator of the Fourth Amendment.
Yeah, this is all about economics and business. And I said it before because China is overtaking us in the tech sector. Either they have or it's very soon they're going to, because Huawei is number 2 in the world for cell phones. Apple's not.
Yes.
Samsung, Huawei, and Apple. And eventually Huawei is going to take over Samsung's spot. So
yeah, I think they are, because unfortunately both Samsung and Apple have made a bad strategic decision. They're going for high-end status phones, like the iPhone XR, which is $1,000, although I'm already seeing ads for discounts. In this current economy, people can't spend $1,000 for a cell phone. They want a phone that is affordable, that's going to do the basic things they need it to do. And I'm not surprised that Apple's, cutting back on production. People just don't want those high-end phones. They don't need all the whiz-bang. And I'm sure probably everybody who got an iPhone went through the same experience. You got yourself an Apple gift card, an iTunes gift card rather, and you loaded up your phone with all kinds of really cool, interesting apps. And after about 2 weeks, you stopped using them all. And you were back to phone calls, web browsing, and email.
Mike, my phone is an old cell phone. It doesn't even have doesn't have any applications on the screen. It's very basic because I'm not going to sit there twiddling my thumb on little screen, I got screens at home.
I understand where you're going here, but I'm going to be very, very honest. I do like my iPhone. And I do have a few apps on there, some stuff for astronomy, some stuff, music software to support Claire and her choir, things like that. And it is very useful to have that, at hand, along with a couple of flight simulators if I happen to have a few minutes where I've got nothing to do. So I do like the iPhone. And I do like the iPhones better than the Galaxies, because Claire's last phone was a Galaxy and it was less than pleasant. It's a good idea. It's just too expensive right now. And I think Apple and Samsung need to look at pulling back on some of the high tech, like the facial scanner, that drives up the price of manufacture, and come on back down to a very basic unit on which you can make calls, do the mail, do the web browsing, and run the basic apps out of the application store. You know, and one of the things that is really annoying to me is that I had apps on my older iPhones that when I upgraded the iPhone and the iOS upgraded, suddenly they wouldn't work anymore. And it would say, contact the developer, and you go over to the iTunes store, and the developer's no longer there.
Mike, can I switch gears? Do I still have some time left?
Yeah, you've got a little time, yes.
Okay, there's a report from Lebanon from a very high, I mean, this is like probably the most reliable news in the Middle East. It's from Lebanon. They said that supposedly the insurgents in Idlib are running really short on ammunition. So something's been squeezed to where they can't get ammunition in there, which means, because remember, Turkey, Iran, and Russia just had that Sochi meeting, and supposedly Erdogan is probably putting the squeeze up by not bringing them any more, aid, pretty much, so like, I don't know if he's going to have...
We can expect a U.S. airdrop any minute now.
Yeah, like in Venezuela. Did you see the non-claps Pence got when he mentioned Trump sends his...
Yeah.
Oh, my God. I mean...
You could hear the crickets off in the distance.
It's a failed coup, Mike. It is a failed coup, so they're going to try the next step, which is sending on in these groups of like what they did in the Maidan,
What they did in Syria, yeah, paramilitaries, mercenaries.
But it's hard over there because they don't have that Wahhabism, the jihadi blowing them. Venezuela is a different group of people. I mean, it's a different,
it's also a different environment. I mean, the U.S. does very well out in desert, wide open country. You can see the enemy coming. Historically, the United States has never done well in a jungle environment. They didn't in World War II. They certainly didn't in Vietnam.
And then real quick, Mike, Russia just completed successful tests on that new cruise missile that's using a nuclear power source.
Yes.
I don't know how successful, because there's always hit and misses with these tests, but from what I've read, that this was successful. But the real test would have it flying around for a couple hours, right? I mean, wouldn't that be unless they did already? Because if it's at a nuclear power source, it should be capable of flying around for a few hours, right?
Well, actually, with the nuclear power source, it can basically fly around the world. And I know they tested the propulsion unit successfully last year, and they're just now going into actual tests in the air. I'm very curious as to how that engine operates. And I've got a bit of a guess, but if my guess is correct, it's going to be very simple and mechanically elegant, fewer moving parts, and that's going to make it more reliable.
And they just showed off the new Buk M3 at Abu Dhabi Expo, and also Kalashnikov showed off their new drone. It's a suicide drone.
Yes.
That flies into his target. And they also showed off the Panzer S1, that whole array system with the rockets and the machine guns on it. I forgot the exact name, but all right, Mike, have a good rest of the show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to John in Little Rock. John, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, why is it everybody on RBN is an expert on Israel? You and this other talk show host that I call in to. I'm an expert. When I offered you guys a real Israeli to interview, and y'all turn it down, and it really upsets me, man. I'm an expert on Israel. I got the real deal. She's ready to come on.
Well, what's his name?
Figure that out. Why?
What's his name?
Her.
What's her name?
Sarah Jacobson. I sent you the email, man.
Okay. I'll have to look for that.
Well, she just made another video that she told me to post. And it's about the DBS Act. And trust me, she really blasts Arkansas where I live at. I love her for that one.
Okay. All right, well, send me the link to the video as well, and I'll see about putting that up as well, okay? All right, listen, John, we're coming up on a commercial break. I got to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines. We'll be back with the last segment of today's program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And this, of course, was President's Day weekend, and we still have a little more President's Day. And apparently California actually issued last Friday a warning to avoid skiing over President's Day weekend because there was too much snow to keep up with the plow demand on dangerous mountain roads. And of course, for skiing fans in California, that was a little frustrating. In many cases, the ski resorts themselves shut down, both because of the dangers of avalanches and because the snow was so high that it was burying tow lines, and in some cases the chairlifts were being impeded by the snow as well. So, getting on out here, let's see, Mammoth Mountain broke a more than 30-year record for monthly snowfall. Snow made for a slippery Monday morning commute over there in Connecticut. And state police are advising drivers to exercise caution. Traffic in Sierra at standstill following the weekend of snow. It's been at a near standstill for most of yesterday. We don't know how it is today. Weekend travelers attempted to head home amid the snow, and Highway 50 and Interstate 80 were open, but chain controls were required. And of course, you always drive a lot slower on those chains. In a lot of places where the communities are unprepared for the heavy winter because they actually believed Al Gore, they're now calling on local businesses and even private citizens to get out there and try and deal with some of the snow as well. That may not go over very well. And part of the problem is that the snow plow drivers are not being very careful about closing off driveways. And so you have a homeowner who shoveled out his driveway. He's getting ready to drive to work. A snowplow goes by, and all of a sudden there's another huge mountain of snow at the end of his driveway. So it's getting a little testy out there. You have to be very, very careful. Snowing hard on Vail Mountain. And finally, an important question that we need to ask. As the snow piles up, where will it go? Well, every time we have one of these record-setting winters, it's going to be followed by a spring with record-setting floods, and that is just, unfortunately, the way that it operates. And in communities where the flood control is not being maintained or doesn't even exist, there could be serious, serious problems. Now, Martin Armstrong is slamming Al Gore's deliberate global warming fraud, says it was done purely to increase governmental power. That was one agenda. The other was Al Gore wanted to make money off of it from his carbon credits. He bragged about wanting to be the world's first carbon billionaire. And he got planning on how to set up his carbon trading system from Enron's Ken Lay, because Al Gore wanted to do to planet Earth with carbon dioxide what Enron had done to California with electricity. It was a scam right from the get-go. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. And please share what you learn here with everybody that you know. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. Have a pleasant and safe rest of President's Day. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.